All right, welcome everybody to the training. Now, what I'm going to start off with here for the science of sound is this investigation into the chakras, right, for this. And so I do want to open the class and open today's training with a Q&A on the chakras. The video that was the pre-learning video is a lot of front-loading information, right? So I want to know first and foremost, was any of that new? I think to most of you that should be a refresher of information, I'm thinking anyways. But if any of that was new to anybody, or if anybody has any questions, please let me know here before we jump into that, because I want to really explore the energy centers of the body and the meridians of the body with as much depth as we can at the beginning of the class to make sure that we can use that as our foundation for how sound heals. Right, and what we're going to be exploring today, because it really is kind of it is the literal communication system of energy in the body, and that's what we're looking at with sound. So I want to open the floor very quickly here to everybody. And apologies, I will have to continue to let people in and out of the waiting room. So if you see me pausing and clicking away, that's what's going on. But I want to open the floor. How did everybody feel about that video? Were there any questions, any thoughts, anything that anybody wants to share? Go ahead, Peter.
I had a question about the gender orientation of the different chakras. You mentioned that, like the root chakra is male, sacral is female, solar plexus is male, heart is female.
That's right.
But then what about the upper three? Is there a gender orientation for those three
So we just
chakras, or are they neutral?
No, we just continue on with the same oscillation. So it's just male, female, male, female, male, female, male, female, all the way up to the top, right? So the crown, so we go male at the root, female at the sacral, male at the solar plexus, female at the heart, male at the throat, female at the third eye, male at the crown. Okay. And I'll just expand on that a little bit here. These types of things can be discussed in different terminology. They can be discussed in different ways. So maybe that's a little bit discurrent to what maybe some of your backgrounds have taught you or whatever with the chakras. We don't need to necessarily get hung up in the masculine versus the feminine nature, because indeed we could dive into each one of the chakras and looking at the feminine and the masculine characteristics of both, right? So for instance, we'll look at the sacral to help me answer that. The sacral chakra, the hara, the lower dantian, right? The area just below the navel. This is the area that we really focus on a lot in Reiki, especially Usui Reiki Ryōhō, where we're working with the lower dantian and like Chiroho and all these different cleaning and breathing techniques that are bringing energy down into the lower belly. Now, the feminine characteristic of that, which is the dynamic healing ability, the all-encompassing flowing aspect of the hara or the sacral chakra, the kind of driver of the chi, as it were, through the body. You can think of that as very feminine. Now, however, when that chi is moving through the body and it's uncovering a lot of resistance or trauma or healing that needs to take place or whatever, you could make an argument. I'm saying an argument, I'm not saying it's fact, but you could make a pretty sound argument that then is a masculine characteristic of the feminine sacral chakra, if that makes sense. Like, we need to drive right into the trauma, right? We don't want to use like the feminine holistic approach. We kind of want to be that direct masculine approach to really address or face the trauma. And then when we're in the midst of it, then it's that kind of all-encompassing femininity of the sacral that's going to take over. So that's an interesting way to look at the chakras as well. And of course, the understanding of the chakras and their masculine and feminine characteristics, that's coming off from people's meditation work. So like when you're deep, I don't know what all of your meditation practices, your personal Reiki practice and so on, but as you are diving deep into yourself and deep into your own work, you might be able to ask for further clarity on that yourself. And maybe some of you have had clarity on that, like when you're really focusing on yourself in a Reiki session. Like, for instance, this is how I do my self-healing. It's just holding the body like this, and I'm not moving the hands, but by doing so, there becomes a communication or like an awareness of that communication in the body, in that some things might seem more feminine or masculine. There might be suggestions as to what those energies are, if that makes sense. Yeah. Yep. Darcy, go ahead.
I have a question. Okay, well, you might even cover it later, but the chakras are constantly fluctuating, I feel. So when you're doing, like, let's say a sound healing therapy session, or even on yourself, a meditation or Reiki, it's still going to constantly fluctuate. So it could go back into maybe a slower, sluggish rhythm, and then it could stay longer. So I guess what I'm wondering is, when I have clients, they always want to know what I'm feeling, if their energy is blocked and all this stuff. And I try just to stay out of it, of course, but it's constantly fluctuating.
Right.
So depending on your thoughts and moods, and I just kind of wanted to clarify that. Am I on the right idea with that?
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. You're on, as far as I'm concerned, in the way that I practice, which is, I guess, maybe more of a traditional Japanese approach to Reiki and energy healing. Then the more we can get out of the way of all of these stories, then the better off we're going to be, because the story or the belief or the understanding of all of these things are a form of attachment, and attachment creates resistance or suffering. Right. And so I'm very appreciative that that can be a difficult position to be in, especially as a practitioner who potentially is receiving clients, right? Clients might want to know what it is that they are moving through, or what it is that they're feeling, or what it is that they're exploring, and so on and so forth, right? And if you are, a practitioner, like for instance, when I was working at the Vitality Center in Hong Kong, this is the oldest Chinese medicine and holistic wellness clinic in Hong Kong. And I was their first, I think, and only Reiki practitioner there. And so that came with a lot of responsibility, and a lot of clients would be coming in, and I would have to assess their position just based on sight, right? Just based on, body appearance or actions, eye contact, the status of the tongue, the issues with their pulse, signs like swelling or water retention and all these types of things. But at the same time, it was quite difficult to balance that with the practice of detachment in Reiki. Because if I tell somebody that, clearly you're holding water in your calves, right? So there's some sort of water retention going on, probably linked to the sacral, probably linked to sexuality, probably linked to a lack of an orgasm or something, like a flow of energy from the sacral. Like, it's a pretty clear connection on all of those things. But if I was to bring that up to the client, well, now where's their mind going to be? For the entire session, their mind is just going to stay stuck on, and you have to understand, especially if you're in the West, where I was working as a proper medical clinic. So it would be like going in the West, it would be like going to see a doctor, right? And so you can imagine, if a doctor in the West tells you something like that, your mind is just going to stay stuck on that one thing, right? And so the question to me is not necessarily about the stagnation or the openness or the resistance or how closed a chakra is, whatever that might be, because indeed we don't even know that. Like, who am I to say that my chakras, like, the only person that I could ever possibly even discuss that with would be myself. You know what I mean? Like, and then that conversation would be fraught with traps of the ego and with the logical mind trying to find explanations when there are no explanations needed. That's the difficult thing in this whole practice of detachment. See, if we think about energy from the perspective of a non-dualistic existence, energy is just energy, right? It has no context to be understood because there's no context to it. There's no mass, there's no form, right? We might see it as light, which is its purest expression, like a photon of light is a particle and a wave, all of these things we're going to talk about in the training. So if we're talking about energy as a particle and a wave, or a pure beam of light, well, then what does that have to do with any one of the particular chakras? You know what I mean? But it does. It has a big context within the chakras, because we are that energy but in form, right? So we are the energy of the universe. This is what Reiki talks about all the time, with Reiki being Rei and Ki, the universal life force, you know, as its most simplistic definition. But we are that universal energy in a solid form, just like these bowls, right? Just like the Tibetan bowls, just like my drum, my tuning forks, the wall behind me, all of that is in form, but it's in a different form, right? So it has a different context. And why am I saying all of that? I'm saying that because as we utilize sound, which is the focus, of course, of this class, as we utilize sound on our clients or on ourselves, then that sound will permeate the form. You know, this is a relatively pure expression of energy. It's sound, right? It's a wave. It has no context besides the frequency and the notes. Okay. So as that wave comes to me, it's going to travel through my nervous system, and it's going to help me understand the context of my own suffering, as it were. Understand where there's resistance in the body, where there's resistance in our form, and then how we can relieve or let go of that. Now, the difficulty again here, and I think this is again building off of Darcy, off of your question, is with clients, if they need to know a story, what do we tell them? And for me, what I would say with all of these forms that I use in sound healing here, all of the Tibetan bowls or the shamanic drum or the tuning forks, the crystal bowls, these gongs that I have here from Burma, all of those things are going to create a new experience for the client to sink deeper into themselves. Okay. And then this is what I'm always saying, like, okay, I focused on the root, the sacral, and the solar plexus, the lower three chakras in that, in the sound therapy or the session that we've just had. Did you have any experience in those parts of the body? And if so, what was it like? You know, and then the response might be something like, oh my God, that's crazy, because I could feel, I'll actually use myself as an example. A video that I'm going to share with all of you is a recording that I made with some of these bowls. It's on YouTube. Maybe you've seen it already. I don't know. But I was listening to that literally right here 2 nights ago. And the feeling of the energy moving into the lower chakras was really overwhelming. It made my left leg start to twitch. It made my pelvis pop. It made my solar plexus really pulsate and get super hot and all that type of stuff. Now, is that mind over matter? Am I creating that environment because I know that it's a root, sacral, and solar plexus sound therapy? Perhaps, right? But if I was a client and I had that experience, I need to hold space so they can understand what's going on there. You know, so if that left leg is the one that's twitching and pulsating because of that response to maybe the root or the sacral bowl, then I might ask them, remember the left side is feminine. So I might ask if there's any issues in life that are feminine dominated, especially directions forward in life, which is what the legs are talking about. That forward motion in life, as it were, right? But again, they're almost rhetorical questions. I'm never giving advice. I'm never saying anything that I saw or experienced, because that doesn't make any difference anyways, what I see or experience. It's all about the client, right? So how does that resonate with you? Did you see the color red? Well, yeah, I did actually. Oh, okay, the color. Actually, I wouldn't even say that because that's a leading question. I would say, did you see any colors in this experience? Okay, yeah, I did. I saw purple and red. What does that mean? Well, that's interesting. Purple's the color of the crown, red's the color of the root. And here, as we're working with sound, we're working on Sushumna Nadi, the spine, right? The movement of this energy through the entire body. So that might help to explain it. But then I would further ask, did you feel anything on the crown? Did your hair tingle, for instance? Or did you have little, like a crown of energy around the top of your head? Did you have a headache? Did your eyes twitch? You know, and then that helps to paint a deeper picture of the experience of the client, if that makes sense. And let me know if there's anything else on that. And the reason why I'm saying to get out of the way.
If I may.
Yeah, Jorn, yeah.
So, for example, the client says, yeah, I saw some colors. You ask, well, we were, or you can confirm, yeah, we were working on your crown chakra or something. But is that, I mean, I also try to stay away from any narrative, but as the question was, yeah, the client does want to know something more. So in your experience, is it enough for the client to just say, oh yeah, well, that was because I was working on your crown chakra, but that tells the client what you've been doing while they were closing their eyes, but does that mean anything to them?
That's a really good question and really well put. I don't think that that means anything unless the client, like for all of you, for instance, you all have a background in wellness, right? You've all got a background in Reiki and these types of things. So that might resonate and that might make a lot of sense. If I have my clients in Hong Kong who were just like, people coming off the street seeking treatment, then I would need to ask a number of further questions. The person would say something like, I saw the color purple. It was super vivid. The first question I would ask is, have you ever seen that before? Right? Is that a normal occurrence for you? And if they say yes, then I'm saying, okay, well, that's fine. Let's see if it happens next time then. If it's no, then they're probably going to follow up by like, well, what does that mean? And then I'll just say, well, we usually see the color purple to represent the universe, the divine masculine of the universe, the crown, and so on. And then I might say the ages that it's associated with, or the potential issues, like maybe having a detachment from linear thought processes, or a detachment from the kind of metaphysical realms, a distrust of religion, or a head that's constantly in the clouds, and so on. And I might ask if any of those resonate, But at the same time, we can't get lost in that space, because seeing purple just means that you're seeing purple as well. It's part of the expression of the energy of the body, right? And so we have to be careful that we're not creating, like Jorn's saying there, we're not creating a narrative that then people are going to be like, oh my God, I totally knew that my crown was blocked, and then this guy just told me it was, and now we've just created and furthered suffering. If that makes sense, right? So this is why I preface that whole response by saying, like, this is the Japanese approach to Reiki, because in Japan and in the East, Reiki is just like, you just place your hands on the person, or you would just do one of these gong baths or a singing bowl session, and that's it. There's no need to discuss anything. Because there's no point, because discussing it creates suffering, it creates a narrative, right? But what if people are coming in and they need a narrative? Like I'm a pretty firm believer, probably because I have a quite analytical mind, that I can't let go of something if I'm not aware of what I'm letting go of. So I might want to have the context of the crown or the other chakras to be able to really let go of that, and to feel it and understand it and explore it. Okay.
Do you sometimes, to really avoid any kind of narrative, do you sometimes just tell people that it's not important that they saw colors or anything, even if you feel that the client is like trying to know something more?
It's a difficult question. I kind of have to answer it like this. If the person is coming in to me for the very first time I've ever met them, then one of the first questions that I ask is, have you done anything like this? Have you had a Reiki session before? Are you familiar with meditation or mindfulness or anything like that? If they categorically say no to all of those things, then I'm under the mindset, which very well could be incorrect. It's a judgment, but I'm still under the mindset that they're not going to understand what purple means, or why is it that they are seeing a deity or a mandala or anything like that. And people in that space are probably going to need a little bit of narrative or a little bit of understanding to figure out what they're moving through. But what I usually tell my clients, almost universally, is, okay, Jorn, so how did that go with you? What did you experience? So on and so forth. Oh, I saw purple, I saw this, I saw that. And I was like, okay, does that resonate with you? And please write it down. And after 5 or 6 sessions, then I tell the clients that each one of these experiences will become part of a puzzle piece of a greater mosaic, and your understanding of your own path, your own healing, will start to make sense as you continue through that. And that is usually how it works. If we touch a trauma, for instance, like in the heart chakra, if we're suffering from anxiety issues, right? Then when the hands are placed over the heart, palpitations might start up, the heart might get really intense, the breathing might become really quick or whatever. Now, that might be a question afterwards. Why did I felt so panicky when your hands were over my heart? I think a pretty safe follow-up question to that is, well, do you suffer from any anxiety disorders or any health anxieties or anything like that? I'm not postulating where they are. I'm not suggesting anything. It's just making a correlation. You know what I mean? In that space. Okay. So I think more so in the West, we can get really kind of caught up on the idea of like this chakra is open or closed or whatever. Like, if we can start to see there's no reason to even think that way, because by saying my chakra is closed, that means you're creating a duality. So you're automatically putting yourself into a trajectory or a mindset where energy is not flowing. Your energy is all flowing because you're alive. So all of you are here, at least I think you are, because it's all virtual, but you're all here, you're all with me. So the chi, that is the universal energy flowing through all of us, is moving. It can't be completely stagnated. If it was completely stagnated, we would be dead, right? And so I think we have to be careful on that discussion about open or closed or whatever, or making judgments, you know, like, I don't know if the videos have just been opened up today. I don't know if anybody's seen them, but they're the videos of me showing you how to play the crystal bowls and showing you how to play the Tibetan bowls. Of course, we're going to go over that in this class, but I wanted to take the time to film those videos as well for you, so you can go back and see them on their own. Those videos are suggesting that here's a way to just make an all-encompassing, relaxing meditation that's going to kind of travel up and down the spine without any judgment or without any stops, without any real focus, or focus just on one area of the body without any need for a story. And we just sink into that experience and just let it happen. Okay. Yep. Darcy?
Can you talk about the opposite? The people that get on the table and don't feel anything. And they get off and after 45 minutes of the sound bath, they're like, that didn't do anything for me. I didn't feel anything.
Yeah.
Because I get those. Yeah. Or they just like, well, what was I supposed to do for me? You know, like if they really, because some people really can't feel because they're not in touch, or I don't know if that's but can you just talk on that for a moment?
Yeah, it gives me chills, this topic. I love it, because this is why in Hong Kong, I don't know if any of you have been, Jorn, I don't know if you've been to Hong Kong. If you were living in Vietnam, I would assume maybe it's pretty close, but I would get these stressed out type A crazy control freak bankers would come in all the time, and they would literally be like this. They'd be like, listen, I think Reiki is a bunch of bullshit. I think meditation is garbage. It doesn't work at all. My wife just wants me to do this because everybody says I'm too stressed. So here I am. So just do whatever you're going to do. Okay, cool. So how do we get that person to open up that space, right? This is I'm not saying that this is foolproof, but it's never failed me, in that I start to present what is going to happen through terms of just relaxation. You know what I mean? So like, Darcy, let's say if you were that level of skeptic and you came to me and you were saying something like that, then I'd say, all right, well, listen, here's what's going to happen in this session. You're just going to lie down and close your eyes. I'm going to be playing these bowls, and then I might, tap them so you can kind of hear what they are. I'd probably show the person as well, so they're familiar with it. So there's not skepticism or like a worry or a wondering of what I'm doing. And then as I show them the equipment, I would just explain that and this is very literal. This is a very literal way as to why these bowls work. Because, tell me how this sounds. I'm conscious of the microphone, but tell me how this sounds. Can everybody hear that? Okay. So you can probably hear the oscillation. There's a high pitch and a low pitch, and there's two different waves moving at the same time. If somebody is very analytical and they want a very logical understanding and they think meditation and everything is garbage, this is literally how it works. Those sound waves are coming in at oscillating frequencies. And what I mean by that is, like, if there's a perfect, I'll do it over my shirt so you can see it. If there's a perfect peak of the wave, you know how sound is a wave, right? Peaks and troughs like this. If there's a perfect peak that's met with a perfect trough, then those cancel each other out. Okay. But if the peak and the trough, because there's two different sounds coming from these bowls. So you can think there's like one sound wave for the high note, one sound wave for the low note. Okay. Because they're coming in at oscillating frequencies, which means the peak for the high note might be here, while the peak for the low note might be just after it. and they never match up completely perfectly. Tell those clients, because this is how it works, that your brain eventually will become so confused by trying to figure out where the sound is coming from that it will just give up. It literally just gives up. And this is how binaural beats work as well. If you've ever listened to one of those meditations on YouTube, especially with a good set of headphones, you can hear that the notes are coming in at all different angles and frequencies on both channels, on the right and the left. And the idea is that it's going to convince the mind to stop paying attention. And if you say it in that way, then not only is it something that's approachable to people because it makes sense logically, but also there's no like woo-woo, there's no like metaphysical stuff in it for people who are like super straight-laced and they're new to all of this. Don't come into that session with being like, yeah, these are like alchemy crystal singing bowls that are attuned to the female goddess energy of the full moon, and we're going to open all the chakras and let the fairies and the archangels come through that. Like, they will bolt right out of your room, absolutely, and they will. But if somebody is open to that, then you can start talking about these things. It's not a criticism of that. You just meet the client where they are, right? And understand that they might already be skeptical because they might not be willing to open up. And every single time in my now, 6 years of being a full-time practitioner, every single time that I've had somebody like that, the reason why they don't open up is because there's a huge amount of trauma that's being held underneath the surface. You know what I mean? Like, that type A controlling banker has to have everything in order, because if they look inside, they're going to find that hurt boy inside or whatever. And they know that, and they're not ready to go into that space. And that's not a criticism, that's normal, right? But in order to even find a level of relaxation, they're going to have to first find a level of trust. So we need to know how to speak to the clients, right? I think for most of you I think right now there's one person from Hong Kong who can probably resonate with that. I think everybody else, most of you are in the United States. In the US, people who are coming to you are probably going to be a little bit more open to these things, right? You're probably not going to be finding like fundamentalists or people with religious beliefs that are discurrent to what you're trying to do. So I don't think that's really going to be frictional, right? But that's how I would go, Darcy. I hope that answers your question on that.
Just a quick one, still a little bit elaborating on what feedback you could give. Let's say, I mean, there's the opposite of somebody who's not reacting at all, somebody who would start shaking. You're actually doing something with that trauma. So, well, in your experience, how do you deal with those types that are very responsive and they start shaking or even crying or shouting or whatever? How do you deal with those?
I would think most of you have probably experienced this if you're a Reiki practitioner, if you have, I don't know how far along all of you are in your own healing work, but I have definitely had those. And I'll give you a couple of extreme cases. One with singing bowls, where I was using singing bowls with one hand like this. And you can imagine there's a massage table in front of me. So I'm playing one bowl and then working with Reiki on the crown. Does that make sense? Right, so I'm just like this. In Reiki, you don't have to move the hands. If somebody is familiar enough with the experience, energy travels through the whole body. You can simply be with it, but that's not part of Jorn's question. So that's what I'm just saying that's what I was doing. And this individual, her arms went up in the air like this, and her wrists locked in these really, really tight postures. And she started shaking her arms like this uncontrollably. And you could see her eyes were fluttering in her head and everything. And so what I'm doing is I'm noticing that. And I just quietly put the bowl down and I put my hand on her shoulder and I just asked, "Are you okay? Is everything good?" Like very gently. "Everything is okay? Is your experience okay? Or is it too overwhelming?" And for her, she was very adept with kind of metaphysical work. So she could travel like that very easily. And she's like, "Yeah, no, I'm fine. This is keep going." And she was back in that space. Now, sadly, there was a lady, and this is incredible, and it speaks to where she was. This is a true story. This is in Hong Kong, working with Reiki specifically here now over the heart chakra. She had a stigmata after the session. And that's not me doing it, it's her. It's her response to her own energy. If you don't know what a stigmata is, it's an image of a burn mark right? Or like a scar that was on her body. And she had never had it before. And it came as a cross. It was literally a cross right across her heart center. And she freaked out and she never came back, sadly. And so as soon as she saw that, you could see there was a lot of fear, there was a lot of panic. And so I was trying to say, like, okay, first and foremost, that is because she was Catholic. So I had to immediately start talking about it with a Catholic approach, right? So it's quite beneficial to be at least relatively fluent in a lot of religious approaches because we're having esoteric experiences here. And so in talking with her about the stigmata and about the meaning of that in Catholicism, and that's a sign of that saintly energy and connecting it back to the energy of God and so on and so forth, she was reassured with all of that, but sadly she didn't come back, right? And so that's just where she is in her journey, that's fine. But when people are really having a big cathartic release, or, you know, shaking, or, you know, maybe going into a trance or crying or having a moment of that's really heavy, that's really deep, I think always a very simple reassuring hand on the shoulder. Or if you're not, you know, if you're not comfortable with placing your hands on the client, that's fine. Then just a reassuring, like, you know, I just want to know, Peter, are you okay? Is everything okay? And we can stop the session at any time if you wish. It's no problem. Something like that, right? And then what I would usually do when if people have asked me to stop the session, then I'll give them space. So it's okay, no problem, Peter, we'll stop the session. And I just want to let you know what I'm going to do is just step outside. And, you know, you've got the remainder of our session, let's say 20 minutes or whatever it might be. You can stay in here as long as you wish for that. And if you would like me to come back in and you want to have a conversation or whatever, no problem. But just know that this is an experience of trauma release. You're facing your trauma, and healing is cathartic. You know, because you don't want to leave people just sitting there. It's not kind of like, oh, cool, Jorn, that's awesome. Well, you're having a trauma and you're going through almost a mild psychotic break. I'll see you later. I'm going to go outside, and you just deal with that. Like, obviously, we need to hold people in some sort of space and confidence that they can trust you, right? And I think that trust and that confidence is built strongly from the perspective, at least, maybe I'm biased on this because I've been in the East for so long, but at least I was seeing there that it was based on the lack of me interjecting any of my beliefs into somebody's path. You know what I mean? Like, you're all on your own healing journey, just as I am, and our own evolution. You can all assist me just like I'm assisting you in this class, but that doesn't supersede your own journey. It helps you identify the path, hopefully, and the signposts of your healing and so on. But that's where it stops. You know what I mean? Like, and so I think we can build an honest level of trust with the client. And if we can do that, then they can surrender and fall deeper into the practice, into the session, you know? So maybe basic things as well, like, you know, just go home and have a couple of glasses of water. If you're feeling really disbalanced in the crown, then you might want to eat some heavy foods, some saturating foods or whatever, you know, to bring that energy down, try to sleep, do a meditation practice and so on later in the day to just try to bring that energy back. And I also, this is a personal preference of mine, but I also open up the lines of communication via the center that I work at or via public outreaches, you know, so like a public cell phone or my professional Facebook page or whatever. So if people have questions, they can reach me there, and I'm not just like, no, I'll see you next week and don't contact me. You know what I mean? So people know that there's not a safety net, but somebody's like I'm still walking with them, and that usually solves those issues. Okay. This is awesome. This is specifically why I wanted to make sure that video was watched beforehand, so we don't have to go through all the kind of basics of the chakras. You know what I mean? I want to focus on these types of really gritty questions as opposed to the things that are, you know, in the manual and the things that we can read. Obviously, we're going to go over that, but I want to keep fielding questions here if anybody has them on the chakras. Like, for instance, the age ranges of the chakras. Did everybody see that? And did that make sense? Does anybody have any questions on that? Because I just want to add a bit of clarity to this, and I did say this in the video. I don't want to sound like a broken record on this, but don't get hung up on the idea like the root is not just conception to 7 years old. Okay. That's when our ego is creating the story of that space. That's when we're focused on that part of our being. But that doesn't mean that when we are 9 years old, that your root can't still be shook. You know, like we can always have experiences or traumas that lock energy into those specific parts of the body. And you can think about it from your age as well, whatever, there's obviously a variety of ages here in this class. Wherever you are, that's where your context is right now. So for instance, I'm 41, so that puts me right at the end of the third eye. Okay, so in that space, what you would expect is a lot of third eye work. So for instance, like me moving into this as a career is very third eye. Following that trajectory, in my life of moving forward and taking the risk and changing careers and doing all that type of stuff, that's following through on ajna, on third eye work. And so you could make a pretty sound argument that that has a higher propensity to happen during the time of ajna. But at the same time, you know, little kids, they can see the future, right? Probably a lot of you had clairs when you were much younger, right? Why is it that we have that when we're younger and then all of a sudden we lose it? Because we don't have a narrative here yet. It's wide open, right? For the most part anyways. So when we're at those ages, we can really, really start to work on those aspects of our being. So, you know, the age ranges are an interesting tool for you to utilize if you are seeing, for instance, a kid who's coming in. This is, by the way, with these Tibetan bowls in particular, and I mentioned this in the videos, when I would have kids that have ADHD or Tourette's, attention or anger issues, anything like that, I would take the bowls that are focused on their age. So if I was seeing a kid that is 12 years old, for instance, then I would only really use root and sacral bowls, because those are the ages that they've already moved through, right? The other ages of the other chakras are still relatively open, at least if there hasn't been any trauma on them. And by doing that and playing those bowls, what would always happen with those kids is they would fight and fight and fight and resist and resist and resist. I've been kicked by kids like that. I've been bit, I've been hit by them, and they just finally let go. And finally, when they let go, then everything is flowing and they usually go into a really deep trance. And then it can be quite amazing, right? So that's just a little bit on the ages of the chakras. Okay. RJ, I think if you can hear me, I think we were talking a little bit about, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we were talking about, yeah, that's right. We were talking about the ages of the chakras and I was giving a different explanation. So I was giving a little bit of a deeper explanation to that as the way I saw it. And what I was saying is in each one of the chakras, you could break down the understanding perhaps of all of the emotions of the root, for instance. Let's just take the root chakra by itself from conception until 7 years of age. Well, if we look at the emotions here or the organs or whatever we want to focus on, then we can look at it in the context or the meaning of all the other energy centers, if that makes sense, right? So one of the big things of the root chakra is stability, or is your survival instinct, right? It's your safety. So safety in and of itself can be understood from ajna, from being able to see that you are safe, or being able to feel mentally stable in your house, for instance, or with the throat, being able to feel as if your voice can be heard. As a child, are you constantly told to shut up, right? Okay, well then that's going to close Vishuddha and it's going to close the root, right? And so I was talking about that with RJ and some people in the chakra clairvoyance coaching a little bit deeper about that, in that regard, that we were looking at each one of the chakras as broken down. But I don't want to dive further into that here unless there's further questions on that.
Hi, Bruce.
Hello, hello, Vivian. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. I'm good. Just back home, like finish everything. Yeah, just according to what you just said, like a kid with ADHD, you use a bowl with like similar age, with his chakra. But what if it's a grown adult, but he or she got a like childhood issue or trauma? Then
Yeah,
which bowl you will prefer? Like,
so
what's
for
the
that,
flower?
like if they still want to stay down on the root, then you can just stay there. Like, you know what I mean? If you want to ground somebody, if somebody's coming in because they're nervous or all these types of things, then you can just play the root or the sacral. You can keep that energy really deep. Now, see, I'm already adding context to it. We don't even need to do that. Like if you are, I don't know if anybody, maybe just give me a thumbs up if you've ever experienced this. Have you ever seen these Tibetan bowls that are so big that you can stand in them? And then they bang the feet and it just goes straight up your spine. If you've ever experienced that, it's incredible, right? So see, we don't need, like, you could take somebody who is maybe 50 years old and place them in a bowl, like they could stand in a bowl like that, and you could just keep hitting it. And eventually that energy is going to be so overwhelming through the entirety of the spine that they're going to be like a wet noodle. They're going to give up, you know? So if I had an adult, for instance, like you're saying, to give a little bit more clarity, Vivian, then I wouldn't be adverse to just playing all of the bowls, right? So if they were doing a Tibetan bowl massage, right? Then, so this is for the sacral here. So what I might do is start with the roots. So let's say that this is a root bowl and I might put it on their body, bring it for 5 minutes, and then change it to a sacral, and then change it to a solar plexus, and then the heart, throat, third eye, and then the crown, and then maybe go all the way back to the root for the final 5 minutes. You know, I know a lot of you, if not everybody in this chat, is a Reiki practitioner. Think about your hand placements as well. As you work on a person, you probably all have your own style, but when you're working on an individual, you probably notice that you move your hands. Maybe you move your hands with the bosan, or the sensation of the illness, or the sensation of the energy of the body, or maybe you're just moving it, you know, because your mind is shut down or whatever, but we're still moving our hands over the body. You can think about that like the bowls as well. From section to section to section throughout the whole treatment. Right. Now with little kids, again, like with little kids who are having, you know, hyperactivity or these types of things, they are a literal body, like bottled up lightning, right? I mean, they're lightning in a bottle. If you have kids that are like this, you know what I'm talking about. They're just insane. They have all this energy and they need to let it out. They need to let that go through them, right? That's like somebody who is really controlling in type A as well. They have all of this energy, but they're controlling it, holding it tight. So that might need to be more of an overwhelming experience of sound within a session to release that energy. So you might need to have really deep bowls or really high pitched bowls that you play pretty intensely to finally crack that shell. You know what I mean? But if there's somebody who's super meditative, you know, like if you go to a temple and you hear the monks, if they're chanting, you know, like in Hong Kong, for instance, if you go over to any of the temples and you hear them chanting, they just hit a bowl like this, just one hit, and then they start chanting. You know, there's nothing else. Okay. Anything else on the chakras? Everybody good? Everybody good? How about the emotions? Do the associated emotions all make sense? And the organs, does anybody want a connection from like a meridian or Chinese medicine perspective? A little bit deeper on that. Nicole, yep.
I would love to hear more like about the meridians. It's just like where the energy flows to the organs and stuff, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's not incorrect here, especially from a Western perspective. So like everybody in the US or whatever, you know, like it's definitely not incorrect to say that the meridians are the same thing as the nervous system. It's not completely correct. I know this is being recorded, so I don't want to be very clear. I'm not saying that they're the same thing, because they're not. But if from a very simplistic perspective, you could say something like, think about the meridians on like a Chinese medicine acupuncture map as being like the conduits of your nervous system. Because indeed, there's a huge overlap. Okay. And so when you sit there and you start working on specific meridians of the body, And it doesn't take anything, it literally doesn't take anything more. I don't know if any of you actually even have this. Maybe Vivian, you do, being in Hong Kong, or Yorn, if you were bringing this back from Vietnam. Have you seen those dolls that they have in the Chinese medicine offices where they have all the meridians and the acupuncture point?
Yeah.
I would really suggest that you grab one of those.
Okay.
In particular, one that has the meridians that are color coded. And just remember what so like, very, very simplistic, right? So if you can just remember that, for instance, the heart meridian runs down to the left pinky and over the left elbow here, right, on the inside, and then travels like this into the heart. The stomach meridian runs down like this, for instance. The gallbladder meridian is coming down this side of the body. If you can just remember some of those, then it helps to give you ideas as to where you might want to place the bowls, right? So if you are working, for instance, on the solar plexus, this part of the body right here, right? What does the solar plexus govern? It governs digestion, okay? And so we think about digestion in terms of like stomach acid and bile salts, hydrochloric acid, and all these types of really caustic things, right? What are those governed by? The liver, the gallbladder, the stomach, the spleen, the pancreas, okay? So all of those together, if somebody was having a really sluggish digestion, then, you know, it might really deepen your practice. If you just have that mannequin in your office, and you can look at just very quickly, like roughly, where is the stomach meridian? Okay, where's the spleen meridian, for instance? Well, the stomach meridian runs down like this on the left side. So you might take a solar plexus bowl, and instead of placing it just kind of here, you might just adjust it so it's a little bit more over that meridian, right? And it's not like that's going to make a massive difference in the session, but what it's going to do is it's going to be putting that frequency of that bowl, that note, right? So for bag fed, so that's E. So you want to be looking at the note of E for the solar plexus. So you would be taking a bowl that's playing E, and you would put it just over the solar plexus area here. If somebody's having anger issues or sluggish digestion or liver issues, right? If they have a cancer in the digestive tract or whatever, you might really want to focus on that part of the body, if that makes sense, right? So the meridians, we can just think about them as being the expression of the nervous system. And the way that I explain this in the West, and this is quite literally how it was figured out, right? In the East, in Hong Kong and China and Japan and everything, people didn't have a functioning understanding of what the nervous system was. But I would bet that all of you here, this will probably resonate with you. When you get deep into your own practice, you know, maybe it's with Reiki or your own meditation practice or singing bowl therapy or whatever it might be. Have any of you felt like, wow, there's a really weird line of energy that's moving right up my body on a very specific line? Like it's so clear that you could pinpoint it. I'm super tactile in my body. So there's not a meditation that goes by where if I get deep enough, where I can't feel as if there's like one line, like a live wire running right down my body. And it'll be the meridians, that's it, right? So that's the chi that's moving. Does that suggest that one of these meridians is off balance or is out of whack or whatever? Maybe. But if I start thinking about it like that, then there's no reason it's going to create resistance. So we recognize it and we just let it go, right? But it's like if you're playing that bowl or if you're tapping into that meridian, then it allows for a more direct, perhaps even tactile connection to that system, to that organ. I saw a number of you kind of nod yes when I was saying, have you ever felt that? When you feel that, you could, if you recognize what meridian it is, then you'll probably start to recognize that associated emotions are being released. Like if you can feel the stomach meridian, you know, what emotion is held in the stomach? Well, we know that type of things, even if you've studied it or not. You know how people have a nervous stomach. We get butterflies in our stomach, right? So nervousness, anxiety, worry, these types of things are held in the stomach, whereas anger is held in the liver and fear is held in the kidneys. This is why when you get scared, you pee your pants, right? We've got all these saying, I got so scared it made me pee my pants. Like we've said all of these things, right? And so if somebody is coming in, like, and they just, like little kids, for instance, why is it that they pee the bed? Little kids, what's going on that they pee their bed? Well, they're having maybe nightmares and they have to release that chi. So it's flowing out as urine out of the body, quite literally, right? So you might want to do work on the sacral and focus on the kidney meridians to help relieve that fear, right? If a little kid is coming and having chronic nightmares, for instance, then you could put just a sacral bowl here or one on the kidneys on the middle lower back and just keep playing that sacral bowl and allow that energy to drain out. If you place it over the appropriate meridian, it's just going to be that much more effective. And not only will it be more effective, but you'll be able to explain what you're doing to somebody who wants to hear this very rationally. Then they'll be like, oh my God, that totally makes sense. This is some of the reason why I'm teaching this class, because I was working with so many people, especially in Hong Kong, and they were like, yeah, just because sound heals. Okay, well, why? Why does it heal? Like, because it works. Okay, but why? Why does Reiki heal? Why do these things happen? Why do they work? If we can't answer those questions, then it's not that we're doing our job incorrectly or anything, but what happens when you have a client that wants to know why? How can you meet that client? And that's kind of the overriding focus of this training, to just allow your understanding of this to go that much deeper. So if you look at the meridians from that perspective, and indeed the chakras are just an extension of the meridians in many ways. The chakras, like I said in the video, are just clusters of nerves that are functioning out of the spine, right? And attaching those particular